When this reclusive neighbor moved into the dilapidated house at the end of our street, no one thought much of it. The place had been vacant for years, the paint already peeling and the lawn overgrown. It was the sort of house that you figured would either collapse on its own or get bulldozed. So, when the old van appeared in the driveway one day, people took notice. It caught us all by surprise. For a while, it was easy to forget anyone lived there at all. Sometimes you'd see a light on late at night, but that was it. But then, people started hearing noises. At first, it was just the occasional clatter late at night, metal clanging against metal, like someone was rummaging through a scrapyard. But then came the scraping. It was a deep, grating sound that seemed to vibrate through the walls of the nearby houses. My husband Pete and I thought maybe they were just renovating, but the noises never really sounded like construction. It sounded like something was being pulled apart or dragged across concrete. Our neighbor, Mrs. Hamilton, was the first to mention it. She said the sounds were keeping her up at night, that they were coming from the garage. Pete and I brushed it off at first, thinking it was just old pipes or maybe raccoons. But soon, the entire neighborhood was talking about it. Still, no one had seen the new resident. My husband, always the friendly type, decided to break the ice. We hadn't seen the new neighbor yet, and he thought it would be good to at least say hello. He figured he'd stop by one afternoon and introduce himself. He didn't even make it halfway up the driveway. The garage door, which had been open, just slammed shut with a force that echoed down the street. No warning, no sound, just bam. Pete said he didn't even see anyone there, but he felt like he was being watched the whole time. He hurried back home, his face pale, and I could tell that the shock, or whatever he had felt, it was enough to spook him. After that, everyone on the street was talking. No one knew much about the person living there, but the weird noises and their obvious avoidance of everyone made people uneasy. I think we all just wanted to know if we should be worried. One night, just after 11 p.m., I remembered I hadn't taken the trash out. Trash collection was early the next morning. As I was dragging the bins to the curb, I saw a light. At first, I thought it was just a reflection from one of the streetlights, but then I noticed someone standing there. Then, I saw it. Just beyond the reach of the nearest streetlight, a figure stood in the front yard of the old house. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the shadows, but then the figure moved. It was the creepy neighbor, holding that same old-fashioned lantern, the light flickering weakly in the cold air. But it wasn't just the sight of them that made my blood run cold. It was the way they were staring directly at me. Their eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that was almost inhuman. The person didn't move closer, but they didn't need to. They didn't say a word, just watched me with that cold, unblinking stare. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe. After what felt like an eternity, but probably 20 seconds, they moved inside the house. I was left standing alone in the street, the trash bins forgotten beside me. After I broke free from my paralysis, I rushed inside and slammed the door shut. My husband was napping on the couch, but the door's noise woke him up. I attempted to describe what I'd witnessed, but my words came out all mixed up. He soothed me and said he'd talk to the neighbors and they'd visit this strange neighbor together. He reassured me that things would be okay, helping me calm down that night. In the following weeks, the area settled into an uncomfortable quiet. The garage went silent, but the dusty van stayed put in the driveway. Then, out of the blue, the frightening neighbor disappeared. Nobody noticed their departure, and no moving truck showed up. They vanished, leaving the house dark and deserted once again. A few days after they disappeared, some of the neighbors went to check out the backyard. What they found were these bizarre sculptures made from random junk. Pieces of metal, old tools, even broken glass. They were strange, twisted things that didn't make much sense, but were somehow disturbing to look at. Rumors spread like wildfire. The whole neighborhood was buzzing with theories. Some said the sculptures were cursed, that they held the old neighbor's spirit trapped within them. Others claimed he had left some kind of message, but no one really knew what had happened to them or why they left those strange things behind. But no one dared go near the house after that. We'd really appreciate it very much if you would just like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. When I first moved into the apartment complex, I was excited about the change. The building was old, but charming, with ivy climbing up the brick walls and a courtyard that felt like a little escape from the city. The neighbors seemed friendly enough at first, always nodding or offering a polite hello when we passed in the hallways. It felt like the fresh start I needed, but things began to feel off almost right away. It was little things at first, like the feeling that someone was watching me when I walked through the courtyard. I would glance up and catch sight of a man standing at his window, staring down at me. He never waved, never smiled, just stared. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was nothing, but it was hard to ignore the chill that crept up my spine every time I noticed him. For weeks the staring didn't stop. I would go out and he would just be staring at me. Then there were the noises. Soft, almost imperceptible at first, like someone whispering just on the other side of the wall. But it wasn't clear enough to make out any words, just a low, constant murmur that would start up late at night. I would be lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I would hear it, whispers, followed by faint tapping sounds, like someone lightly drumming their fingers on the wall. I couldn't pinpoint where it was coming from, but it seemed to echo through the entire building. One night, after hearing the noises again, I decided to step out into the hallway, hoping to figure out where it was coming from. As soon as I opened my door, I froze. Standing just a few feet away was the man from the window. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with thinning hair and a hunched posture. He was muttering something under his breath, but it was too quiet to make out. I tried to move past him, but he stepped into my path, his eyes wide and unfocused. His breath smelled stale, and his words became louder, but still, I couldn't understand him. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do. Eventually, he just turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, shaken. I hurried back into my apartment and locked the door behind me. My hands were trembling as I called the building manager the next morning, recounting what had happened. I expected him to be concerned, maybe even offer some reassurance, but instead, he brushed it off. "That's just old Mr. Thompson," he said with a chuckle. "He's harmless, just a bit off. Lives alone, doesn't bother anyone. You'll get used to him." But I couldn't get used to him, and what did he mean by "you'll get used to him"? After that encounter, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, like his eyes were on me even when I was safe inside my apartment. And the whispers and tapping didn't stop. If anything, they seemed to get worse, making it impossible for me to sleep. I started hearing rumors from other tenants, whispers of Mr. Thompson's past, stories about him being mentally unstable. Some said he used to be a professor, but something happened that broke him. No one knew the full story, and honestly, I didn't want to know. What I did know was that the unease that had taken root in me wasn't going away. Every time I saw him in the hallway or felt his eyes on me from his window, that same fear would return. I found myself avoiding the courtyard and staying away from the hallways at night. After a few more weeks of sleepless nights and growing anxiety, I realized I couldn't stay there. I packed up my things and found a new place on the other side of town. It was newer, more modern, and most importantly, it didn't come with a strange man watching my every move. Peace of mind is worth more than anything else, and I wasn't going to find it in that old apartment building.